Hello and welcome to this repair tutorial, and today we're going to be looking at a Technics SU-X955, and this amplifier came into the workshop and the customer advised that it had an issue with intermittent sound loss, which is not uncommon considering the age of the amplifier. And I've worked on many of the Technics series, and the SU-X really is a delight. When you look at the construction of it, it's very modular, so that enables you to remove all of the different circuit boards. And then also as well, originally it would have formed part of a stack system, so there would have been a record player, a dual cassette deck, and then also a tuner. And over time what has happened is, of course, those other key components, for whatever reason, no longer available, and a lot of owners have held on to the amplifiers, or they've gone out and actively sought this particular make of Technics amp. And when you listen to the audio quality that this amplifier produces, it's just exceptional. And I totally get why customers, and people will go out and go source these particular amps just purely for that sound quality that comes through. Really ahead of its time. So it was a microprocessor, or it is a microprocessor based amplifier. And this delivers quite a bit of punch. So when you look at the output from this amp, it's 2 times 60 watts at 8 ohms, so that is that's pretty good going there. And then when you look at the audio output IC, it's the Sanyo, and I would refer to this as a thick film device, and it's an SVI 3204. These were used extensively during this time era, so it's probably from about the mid 1980s, I would reckon. And unfortunately, these audio ICs now are no longer available. So if you're going to repair these amps, and maybe you have a failure of them, you really have to work hard to try and find these Sanyo originals. So if you are going to go out looking for them, look for, say, new original, old stock, or maybe pulled original, because unfortunately what you will find is there's quite a lot of these devices out there which come in from the Far East, and they are counterfeit. So when you install them, they either fail on power up, or it's some kind of hybrid device and the number's been scratched off and then re-etched with a different number. So when you look at the different inputs, so you have a moving magnet input, so that's phono input stage. Then you have your tuner, aux. There's also a tape 1 and a tape 2, and then also the CD. What's really nice is it also has an optical input as well, so you have both the CD and the DAT, and then you'll see from the video that you also have the ability to select super bass. And when you select that and you rotate the bass control, you've got a lot of thump in there. And I think for a lot of amplifiers, sometimes you can select bass control and you see a little bit of difference, but nothing sort of jumps out at you. And then you also have the surround sound as well. So when you look at the amplifier rear, you have the ability to connect 2 sets of speakers then for surround sound, and then also for A and B selection as well, which is absolutely terrific when you look at it. So really to sort of give you insight for what happens for this series of amplifier, and remember, this isn't really down to the design of the amplifier as such, it's just really what happens to all sort of electronic equipment over many years. So the first thing in terms of work that you actually undertake is to look first off, once you've removed all the dust which gathers over time. The first thing I'm doing here is I just remove the back panel, and I remove all the screws from there, and then what I then do is I disconnect the cooling fan. And just a little bit of information about the cooling fan. The cooling fan doesn't run continuously, and it's not just simply a case where maybe if the main audio output IC is running hot, that it then comes in. It's actually dynamically controlled. So sometimes maybe if you're listening to a particular piece of audio and then you have a peak within the audio track, you may well see that the fan just spins momentarily, or if it's running at quite high power, then it may well switch on and then continuously cool then, and then will then shut off. So I'll remove the cooling fan, and then what I do, but it's a latter stage of the amplifier service and repair, I just clean that fan up. And then what I'm able to do then is to ensure that you got nice free movement, and of course it does get heavily coated in dust and dirt over time, so that all gets cleaned. And then if there's any requirement, but not normally, because it's a sealed bearing assembly, you just want to make sure that thing runs smooth and nice, there's no noise or anything like that, and it's very free and all good with regard to this amplifier. And then what I then focus on is the RCA input sockets. So you will always find some or most of them will be dry jointed. So again here, you know, you reflow each one of those and then just move across from there then, right? So when you look, you have the multi-input connectors, which is where you have the ability to connect to the other stack system, tuner, etc. And then I also focus on the speaker terminals. So this is on this particular make of amplifier, it just comes on a separate board and via an umbilical cable. And what I'm doing there is I just resolder those connections. And the reason why, these are stress points, and we've said this in other tutorials, you will always have some kind of mechanical stress, and then that can lead to premature sort of intermittent loss of sound, which could be, you know, due to a bad connection. Once that's all done, what I'm then able to do is I just remove the releasing fixing screws, and there's two either side of the thin metal heatsink, and then you have three additional longer screws where they go through onto these sort of supports, and they screw then into the main amplifier case. So once I've removed those, what I'm able to do then is just to slide back the main board, and it disconnects them from the front panel, and then I can then raise up the board. And what I'm aiming for now is to remove the speaker protection relay, and that's the black relay that you see in the video. And this is a 24 volt double pole changeover relay. So I'm not looking to to clean the contacts on this. You know, it's very, very old, and this really is the issue that you find. You know, sometimes if you have intermittent loss of sound, you can kind of tap the top of these relays and it'll sort of restore it, and then it'll go off. So what I then put in is a brand new sealed relay, 24 volts double pole, as I say, and then that provides that longevity back on there. At the same time, I'm inspecting the underneath of that circuit board, because there's particular areas which I need to focus on. You have the main audio output IC, so what I'm looking at there are all the different solder connections on the multi-pins, and some of them are dry jointed on this particular amp. So what I'm doing is I just reflow every single one of those pins, so you know you've got good leather solder, nice and bright, good adhesion. And then I'll then focus on Q702, Q705 and Q701. So these are the series voltage regulator or series shunt transistors that form the low voltage power supply, and you will always find dry joints on there, you know, and that's a common reason why sometimes maybe you get a loss of display, or you give it a tap and then you get sort of intermittent operation. Now, because they run hot, what I'm not looking to do here is just to reflow the solder. What I do is I desolder all of the pins of the transistors. I then clean it down with a flux remover, so it's nice, bright and clean, and then I'll then resolder each one of the pins. Now, there's no reason to remove the transistors from the rear heatsink, because what you have is these silicon heat transfer pads, so it's not using, for example, a conductive heatsink compound. But when you look at the main audio output IC, what I do there is I'll remove the two fixing screws left and right, and then as you can see in the video, when I look into there, you can see that the heatsink compound is completely dried out. You know, it's offering no thermal conductivity whatsoever. So you just got to get in there just with a plastic scraping tool. Don't use anything metal, and then you can then clear all of that out. And then what I then do is I just use the flux remover just to remove any residual of that. So I've got the back of the IC. It's nice, bright, clean. And then what I then apply then is brand new heatsink compound, and that's important, right? Because this, you know, this thing can run at 60 watts per channel. You know, it could potentially generate a lot of heat, and really you want to help the IC out. You know, you don't want to make the life harder for the device than it needs to be, and by having a good level of heatsink compound on there, that's all good, and you get good thermal conductivity and also uniformity as well, you know, in terms of heat transfer. So that has then been done on this amplifier. And then what I'm focusing on next is to remove the front fascia, and that's dead easy. So you just need to turn the amplifier over, and then you just remove 3 fixing screws, and then what I can do is I can pull forward the entire front fascia. And then what I also do at the same time is I just refix in the main amplifier board. So just slide it back into position. Of course, it's not connecting to the front fascia, that's fine. And then with regard to the front fascia, what I can now do is I can just release 2 fixing screws on the 955, and then you just have a couple of plastic tabs, and as soon as you remove those, you're then able, providing that you've removed the locking nuts then for the balance, treble and bass controls, you can then just unplug the what I would term as the tone board. And you can see in the video the tone board also has on there as well the main display, and then what you can see in the video is this thick layer of dust, and this is normal, right? So it's not that the amplifier has come from a smoky environment, it's just what happens. And then what you can use is some glass cleaner and a lint-free cloth, and literally as you wipe that off, of course that's really going to bring the display back, in terms of high visibility. And at the same time you have the red lens filter, which is at the front on the main panel. So again, lint-free cloth, just clean that up with some glass cleaner, and then it really makes a huge difference. And then what I'm looking for also is any dry joints on the display itself, and in this case there was a couple of cracked solder joints, so just reflow all of those. And then I also look at the tone board, and what I'm focusing on here is a number of things. I'm looking of course for any dry solder joints, but then I have good access then to the user controls and the switches. So what I do is I spray directly into their De-Oxit, and then I'm just using some kitchen roll just to catch any excess, and I just leave it just for a couple of minutes to do its work. And then what I'm then able to do is just work those controls backwards and forwards, maybe 10-15 times. And then what you'll also find as well, some of the lubricating grease around the shafts where it goes into the main collar of the controls just solidifies, a little bit hard to turn, and that will just dissolve out. And then you get this really smooth action of these controls, and then these are center zero or center dent type. So as soon as it clicks into the center, really nice feel to that, and no noise whatsoever during operation then. What I also do as well is I just remove the power board, which also contains the headphone socket, and you can see that in the video. So what I'm looking to do there is just to check that headphone socket. Not in this case, but often in many cases you will find dry solder joints, because again it's a mechanical stress point. So I just reflow all of those, and then also clean the internal contacts then with De-Oxit. So I'm able then to just reassemble that and then put it back together. And then the next thing that I'm looking at is the volume control. And again, the volume control with the original lubricating grease can become very difficult to turn. This one was not too bad, but I have had similar amplifiers in the workshop. Literally, it's almost like you got to get a spanner on it to turn them around, just completely solid. But again, you can spray De-Oxit directly onto the encoder, and then just rotate it multiple times, and then eventually you'll get that nice free action, almost to the point where if you touched it, say with your little finger, you can just rotate it backwards and forwards. Just really positive feedback in terms of response. And then I'm also checking as well the solder joints. All right, it's very important to check the solder joints, because again, mechanical stress point, and then that can then be refitted. And then what I'm also doing is doing all of the internal clean. As with any amplifier, as I said, you will gather a lot of dust over time, so then that all gets cleaned up and all good. And a common thing that comes in, and you see this for these series of amplifiers, but other amplifiers as well, whenever you've got the ability, for example, to have a preamp output and then connect, say, to the main input, so this is preamp output then to the main power amplifier, normally what the manufacturers do is they fit links. So NAD, for example, have such links, and that's the same here with this Technics series. So sometimes you'll see these up for sale where, for example, someone will put the advert and say, well, it only works from the CD input. And that's true. It will only work from the CD input because these links are not installed. So in the video you can see that I've just fitted some brand new external links just to connect external in to external out, and then you then get full range in terms of all of the analog input. And then I also then test the amplifier then through the fibre optic as well. So these sort of analog to fibre optic converters, are relatively cheap. So again, if you're thinking to repair these types of amplifiers, you can get at low cost, and then just test all of that, and that's all good. And then the next stage then is really to put the amplifier through its test phase, and then that was then completed, and no issues identified, nothing like that. And then the other last thing, which is kind of more cosmetic but it is important, is on the bottom of the amplifier, when they're manufactured, you have these sort of small little 10mm square self-adhesive feet. Now what happens when it was in a stack system, over time this soft rubber becomes extremely hard, almost like a plastic material, or in some cases they just pull off and then attach then to the device that it was sitting on top. So if it was sitting on top of the tuner, that's probably where you're going to find it, wherever the tuner may well be. So just to sort of finish off this repair, it's a case of just renew those sort of rubber feet, and you can see that in the video. And then the last stage, as with all of the amplifier repairs that I undertake, was just to clean the amplifier, you know, not just internally but externally, with a non-corrosive plastic cleaner, and that really brings that front fascia up really well, and then also the main metal part. For some reason there was a slight sort of indent on the rear. I'm not sure if that had happened during transit, but it didn't take very much, you know, just to straighten that, and then you get perfect alignment then for the front panel. And as I said, this is a really nice amplifier. So again, for any of these SU-X type amps from Technics, you know, if you are able to source one and it's not the audio output IC which has failed, you know, it's really a you know, good experience if you're doing amplifier repairs to restore one of these. And as I say, with these tutorials that I run, that's a lot of information, you know, you sort of can get from here, which will just, you know, steer you on your way. But always best to take a systematic approach, so concentrate on one particular area and then work your way through. And as I always and keep repeat saying, you know, don't just repair a specific fault, you know, ensure that you do a lot of the other remedial work, which is age related. But of course what that will mean is that you then get, you know, many years of good operation after that. So really that brings us to the end of this tutorial, and probably next week now, excuse me, I'll be putting up some more repair tutorials. So we've got coming into the workshop some Arcam amplifiers, and there's also I think inbound a Denon as well, so I think that's a 520 or 720, but when he comes in, be rest assured I'll also be doing a repair audio tutorial on that. Alright, so all the best to everyone. Until the next time, thank you for listening. Bye bye.